With UFC Fight Night Whittaker versus Aliskerov just taking place over the weekend, I'm going to be giving you my best matchups to make for all the top fighters on the card that you can now see on the screen. Kicking it off with Rinat Fakhretdinov. I think Rinat definitely deserves a crack at the rankings at this point. He's on a 21 fight win streak. And yes, there is a draw in there with Eliezer Deleski dos Santos in his second last fight, but that fight was a crowd pleaser. It was very competitive, and I think it only plays into his favor to actually get the opportunity in the top 15. And I think Rinat needs to have a decent test in there against someone that is experienced and that has power that can match his realistically. And I think the best fighter to do that at this point is Geoff Neal. Now, this was actually very hard to match up because honestly, this was probably the hardest matchup to do. It took me the longest out of any of the fighters on this card. And that's because of the timeline issues, because I wanted to say Vicente Luque, but the turnaround for Vicente Luque on the August 3rd fight night against Nick Diaz would just be too quick. And then the same for Michael Chiesa against Tony Ferguson. I don't think they're both going to come out unscathed in that fight. I do think they'll both win, but I think they're going to need some time to rest. And just in terms of the timelines and Rinat fighting literally just in the past weekend, I just don't think it's matching up well. And then I also thought Neil Magny as well, but I do think that Neil Magny should fight Randy Brown in September or October, which I did mention in my UFC 302 matchups to make video. If you haven't seen that, I'll leave it in the description below. So with that, it just ultimately does not leave too much breathing room for any of these matchups. So Geoff Neal could be a little bit of a stretch, but I think if we do get it, I think it'd be very exciting. And Neal needs to redeem himself. I don't think that there's a much better way of doing it than breaking a 21 fight win streak of someone that, you know, he's not ranked, but there are a lot of people in the welterweight division that do not want to fight Rinat Fakhretdinov. So that it could definitely be a redeeming quality if he does get that win, and it bounces Geoff Neal straight through into that top 10 again. So yeah, I think like both of these guys, they both have power, and it'll definitely be a good test for Neal with his ground game and see if Rinat can just completely swallow him on the ground with that wrestling, or to see if Rinat Fakhretdinov, yes, he has a 21 fight win streak, but can he beat someone like Geoff Neal who has fought the best in the welterweight division. So I think it's definitely a interesting matchup, a big jump for Rinat Fakhretdinov, but with a 21 fight win streak, you would think you'd probably be ready for it. And I think that you make this for UFC 308 in Abu Dhabi as the feature prelim fight. Now moving on to Nasrat Haqparast. Nasrat has been extremely entertaining on the feet, especially in recent times. He's gone 3-0, 4-0, I believe, and I want someone to test the grappling before he gets into the rankings. So I think you make a top 15 eliminator fight against Joel Alvarez. Joel he's looked pretty good in the UFC. I mean, he's pretty much, you know, he's won every single fight aside from losing to literally ranked level opponents like Arman Tsarukyan and Damir Ismagulov as well, and he's 17-0 when it comes to submissions. But I think he needs to redeem himself in the stand-up because he's 3-2 in the stand-up, and after what we saw Arman Tsarukyan did to him with literally just, if you haven't seen that fight, there's just blood everywhere. It's one of the bloodiest fights, and I think he does need that redeeming factor there. And if he can get this done, if either of them get this done, it's 100% a top 15 fight that they're getting next. It's a great clash of styles. And not only that, it also helps for Nasrat Haqparast, it puts Morocco on the map. And then it could also allow the UFC to have a second Spanish ranked fighter with Ilia Topuria as well, if Joel Alvarez can actually get through this. So I think there's a lot of redeeming qualities to this fight for the both of them, for their countries. And I think you make this for a fight night in late October. Now moving on to Johnny Walker. It's been a bloody rough year for Johnny. And as entertaining as he is, he needs to be putting that single-digit ranking position on the line. And with Menafield and Mirzakhanov most likely fighting in August on that same card as Vicente Luque and Nick Diaz, I think that you give him the winner of that fight. And I think that that is going to be Azamat Mirzakhanov. It's a good chance for Azamat to gain more of a following, because if he can beat Johnny Walker, I think anyone that can beat a character like that will just get more of a natural following anyway. And it's just beating a notable name in general. And if he can do that, I mean, he's going to bust through that top 10 ranking and get into, into that top 6 to top 10 ranking position, which I did mention in my Ranking the Hype Trains video. I did say that he would be in that top 10 ranking position. So if you haven't seen that, I'll leave that in the link in the description below as well. And I think when it comes to him, it's a redeeming factor, because you look at Azamat, he is a power puncher. He's 9-0, I believe, when it comes to KOs, or 9-1. And Johnny Walker has just been decked by Magomed Ankalaev. He's been absolutely destroyed by Volkan Oezdemir. So if Johnny Walker can have this fight and beat a momentum-driven power puncher in Azamat, then it's, he could be completely back on track. And I think that he should do this. I think this fight should happen at UFC 308 as well. Having that redeeming factor of, fighting in the desert and actually winning over there in the Middle East for Johnny Walker. That would just take so much off his shoulders, and I think it would make him so happy. And it's a winnable fight for him, especially in comparison to the other two that he literally just fought. I think that this would be that redeeming factor for him, and he could, it obviously make a change in momentum for him coming into 2025. So yeah, I do think that that would be great for UFC 308, but we could see it in a fight night in December, or possibly even January, depending on Walker's recovery. He's going to need a fair bit of time off. And it also depends on Azamat Mirzakhanov fighting Alonzo Menafield and how much damage he takes in that one too. Now moving on to Volkan Oezdemir. Look, on the flip side of Johnny Walker, I mean, he made the call out, and with a finish like that against that notable name in Johnny Walker, he should 100% get it. He should 100% get Jan Blachowicz. No argument there whatsoever. Jan hasn't fought since July last year, losing to Pereira, and Oezdemir has taken no damage. So I think you can make this a fairly quick turnaround, and I think you make it for a headliner, hopefully, if we get it, a headliner in Europe, for a fight night in Europe in September. Now moving on to Shara Magomedov. I know there's been a lot of talk around it. Both Shara and Bo Nickel want to fight each other, but I just don't think it'll happen. At least not anytime soon. It's just not a great business move for the UFC. Both of these guys have been very marketable to the UFC, covering the different regions. Obviously, Bo Nickel through America, and then Bullet through the Middle East. And I just feel like there isn't really any point from a business perspective in tearing one of them down so early. And I think they will do this matchup. If they keep winning, they'll definitely do this matchup, but it'll be when they're both ranked, or at least when one of them are ranked. And I think that that's fair. I just don't think you trade them in and have one of them cut out. I just don't see a point, especially when they're covering so much space when it comes to the Middle East and America as well. And I do think that Shara, I think he needs a solid grappling test, which I did mention in the recap video for this fight night. I think to emphasize UFC's business decisions though, I just don't think that they'll even give him a strong grappling test yet. And I think if he's not getting that, I think the perfect way to get him closer to the rankings while still making the fight entertaining is to give him Mikel Olachechek. Mikel has had it pretty rough in the UFC so far, but if he gets this win, he will be able to redeem himself and get himself right back on track and not get himself cut from the UFC. So it's very much a all or nothing fight for Mikel Oleksiejczuk. And it's pretty exciting fight as well, because you've got the power of Oleksiejczuk versus the technique and the unorthodox style of like the kicks from Bullet. So I think it would definitely be an entertaining matchup. And they've both fought within this month. So I think that you make this, it's very easy in terms of a timeline perspective. So I think you make this one as well for UFC 308. And I think you can put this one probably honestly as the main card opener. So yeah, I think that this will be a fantastic fight. It'll be a very big driver for the Middle East, you know, just bolstering that UFC 308 card, and I feel like there's just no way that Shara Bullet's not going to be on it. Obviously, we know he's not going to be fighting in America because of what's happened to his eye. The athletic commissions are just not going to let it happen. So with that opportunity there in the Middle East and the UFC really building it up, I think it's pretty much a no-brainer for someone as big as Shara Bullet and how big he is getting. Put that on the UFC 308 card. Now, Kelvin Gastelum. Look, Gastelum, he could make welterweight. He could make it again if he tried. But I just genuinely, I don't think Dana is going to give him that opportunity anymore. I mean, you could tell in the post-fight press conference he's done. He's over it, and that's fair enough. He's missed weight more than a couple of times, and that's really just down to a discipline standpoint as well. And the thing with Kelvin Gastelum, though, he's still a very big name, and I think he needs a fun fight in the division. So I think, and not in welterweight, sorry, it's middleweight. And I think a fun fight that you give him in middleweight against someone that does have a bit of a name themselves, mainly just specifically for their fights, is RoboCop. Give him RoboCop. Gregory Rodriguez, he is a tank. He has so much KO power, and he has a pretty decent ground game as well. He's 3-0 with his submissions. And I think just when you look at this stylistic matchup, you know, they're both fairly well-rounded, and Gregory Rodriguez, he's obviously got that power, so it's always good to see someone, if, you know, Kelvin Gastelum can fight someone that can really test his chin and see what can happen there, because obviously Gastelum has never been knocked out. We know that his chin is made of something, and he can be tested on the feet, and the wrestling of Kelvin Gastelum can test Gregory Rodriguez as well. So there's a lot of questions in this fight, but it will ultimately be fun anyway, because if these guys are boxing each other, I mean, Gregory Rodriguez has a lot of power. He's been a little bit shinny, and Kelvin Gastelum does have power too, but it's whether Gregory Rodriguez can actually take him out on the feet. And on the ground, it's a very big mix-up of styles, the wrestler versus the grappler. So yeah, I think this is just overall, I think it's a very fun fight, and I think that's what Kelvin Gastelum needs, and I think that's what Gregory Rodriguez makes. I think he just makes fun fights too. So I think you make this for a fight night in late September. Now moving on, Sergei Pavlovich. Look, definitely could not picture him being on a 2-fight loss streak, but with him especially obviously before Aspinall, he looked like an absolute weapon. I honestly thought he was going to beat Aspinall when they fought, but yeah, it just means he's dropping back now. He has to drop back in the rankings, and I think Marcin Tybura is the one to take that test. He's coming off the first round submission against Tai Tuivasa, and also they've both lost to Aspinall as well. Literally 2 fights ago, they've both lost to Tom Aspinall. So I think it would be good to make this one as a fight night, like a co-main in October, a fight night in October, or possibly on the Europe card if it's there in September. I will say that I am liking Pavlovich more so in this matchup, but after the last 2 fights that we've seen, he isn't invincible. So it'll be good to see Pavlovich fight someone in Marcin Tybura who is a veteran and also has a good submission game. He's 7-0 with submissions, so I think overall it'd just be good to see Sergei Pavlovich on the ground if it's possible. If Marcin Tybura doesn't get knocked out, it'd be good to see what he has on the ground, and fighting someone like Marcin Tybura, who is 7-0 with those submissions, it could raise a couple question marks. So yeah, I do think that you make that one for a co-main event fight night in October, or that Europe card possibly in September, or if we ever get it at all. Now, Alexander Volkov. Volkov has just been so underrated recently. I mean, he has looked extremely impressive literally since he lost to Tom Aspinall. And I think you give him the loser of UFC 304, which I don't think it will be Aspinall, and that leaves him with Curtis Blaydes. Look, Volkov, he's looked great on the feet, and he's looked great with the takedown defense as well through his last couple of fights, and Curtis Blaydes is the perfect fighter to test that takedown defense of Volkov. And if Volkov wins, he gets to avenge the loss that he originally had against Blaydes in their first fight. So it could be it's a redeeming factor for him personally against Curtis Blaydes. And then if he wins that, give him the Aspinall rematch for the title 100%. As John, I think it'll be undisputed because John Jones will probably be gone by then, by the time that those two actually match up to fight. And then, if Curtis Blaydes wins, he is straight in that contention again, because he's just beating Volkov, who is on a 4-fight win streak. So yeah, a great matchup for both of them. This is probably the most clear matchup I can probably see out of this whole entire video, to be honest. I think it's pretty brain dead simple. And yeah, overall, this fight would be very exciting. It could definitely see a finish in this one. Now, moving on to Ikram Aliskerov. Look, just like Abus Magomedov after losing to Sean Strickland, Ikram's got to back up and fight pretty much just outside the rankings. Abus Magomedov fought KO Borralho, and I think that Ikram has to do the exact same thing, because he is not ranked at this point in time. And I think he should fight Bruno Silva. Give Ikram the chance to redeem himself against a power puncher and possibly actually get to exercise his ground game. We just haven't really seen that from him in the UFC. And, Bruno Silva, he has power, he's gritty, he's durable. He took a left hook from Alex Pereira and did not die. So I think it is fair to test Ikram with Bruno Silva. I mean, Bruno Silva, he hasn't had a very good run in the UFC, but he has fought some killers. He really has. And he's also coming off that pretty bloody controversial Chris Weidman eye poke extravaganza of a fight, which I don't think was the right call whatsoever. I don't think it should have been called like that, and they should be doing that rematch straight up. But yeah, look, it's a touchy subject obviously in that fight, but Bruno Silva is like 1-4 in there, and I think if he can beat Ikram, if he gets this fight and he gets it against Ikram Aliskerov and he beats him, then he's definitely redeeming himself, and he's getting himself closer, obviously, to the rankings as well, so he can really, really make a turnaround, because Ikram is not a small name, and Ikram has literally only lost to killers, Robert Whittaker and Khamzat Chimaev, both by bloody uppercut. But yeah, look, I think this is a very fair matchup, to be honest, and if either of them get this win, then it's contention for that top 15. So, and it's better for Ikram that way, because I think he needs to, obviously, going against Robert Whittaker getting destroyed, I think he needs to have just that natural movement through the top 15 now and not rush it. And I think as well, you make this one for UFC 308 in Abu Dhabi somewhere, depending on how stacked it is, obviously. I think you put it somewhere in the prelims, higher up in the prelims. Now, Robert Whittaker, the main man, a fantastic win for him. And just like Sean Strickland beating Abus Magomedov and getting that title shot, and then also with Dustin Poirier beating Benoit Saint-Denis and getting his title shot, the same should be said for Robert Whittaker. The exact same thing should happen for Robert Whittaker. And I think he should get the title shot over Sean Strickland as well. That's definitely touchy, but it's obviously, when it comes to Sean Strickland, it's just not made that simple as it was for Dustin Poirier in lightweight, and as for Sean Strickland beforehand, beating Abus Magomedov and getting it against Israel Adesanya. It's just not that simple. And if Izzy beats DDP at UFC 305, then you've got a ton of matchups here. You've got a ton of timeline. You got a ton of storylines here when it comes to literally Robert Whittaker, Israel Adesanya, Sean Strickland, and Dricus du Plessis. You've got so many storylines here that can be made, and that's what makes it so difficult with these matchups. So you've got, if Izzy beats DDP at UFC 305, then you've got Strickland, who will get that rematch against Israel Adesanya, and arguably that was Israel Adesanya's worst loss against Sean Strickland, getting 49-46. So I think, you've got that one there, so that more emphasizes Strickland's point to get that rematch there. But then if Dricus du Plessis wins, then both Whittaker and Sean Strickland get that opportunity to avenge their losses against him. And Strickland, I will say, is the more favored fighter for both of those matchups, but Whittaker just simply deserves the shot more because he's gone 3-1 since his last title shot, and Strickland has gone 1-0, beating the same guy that Whittaker beat in that 3-1 run, being Paulo Costa. Now, granted, Strickland's win was more impressive than Robert Whittaker's over Paulo Costa, and he did also arguably beat Dricus du Plessis in their title fight. I think he beat Dricus du Plessis. But on the business side of things, I don't see the UFC being too keen to have Strickland as the champion again. So I think they would definitely prefer Whittaker in that sense, on that business perspective. So there really is only one way to settle it. Make Whittaker versus Sean Strickland as the UFC 305 co-main event in Perth, and the winner simply gets this shot and would make for an amazing fight on the feet. You've got the Philly shell boxing style of Sean Strickland, that economical style, versus Robert Whittaker's karate style. So yeah, a fantastic fight. It's obviously a no-brainer that it's a fantastic fight, and I think that is honestly the only fair way you can realistically go about it, unless there's any injuries in there or anything like that. But if either Sean Strickland or Robert Whittaker is going to be the backup of UFC 305, 100% it's Robert Whittaker. Without a doubt, he definitely deserves it. He's literally fought some guy outside the rankings. He's supposed to fight Khamzat Chimaev. He's fought Ikram Aliskerov, took that huge risk, absolutely annihilated him. And yeah, he's just been the company man. He really has, and he definitely deserves it out of those two. I'm not saying Sean Strickland isn't. Sean Strickland's a company man too, but he's much more controversial. And Robert Whittaker, 100%, he deserves to be. He pretty much almost completely approved that he is going to be the backup anyway. So yeah, but considering nothing happens between DDP and Israel Adesanya, make this for that co-main event at UFC 305, because there's storylines everywhere. I don't think there's a wrong way to go about it. And yeah, ultimately, this is the co-main event. Absolute no-brainer. Now, if you've enjoyed this video and you want to see more MMA-based content, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one.